Hi, it's Hank Carr from Fork and Cleaver Farm. There was a question on one of my other videos about the controller that I use to run my maple syrup system. So I thought I'd talk about that today. The system is based on an Arduino. And lots of people in the maker community know about the Arduino. It's used in education. Great little board. It's got some issues. My friend Graham will tell you that the fact that the spacing on the pins is not quite right on one side, that's a problem. But it's a good little board. But it's not very capable. So what I needed was a bigger, better board. Now, this is called a MEGA2560 Pro. It's an Arduino. It looks like this. It's got a lot more pins on it and a lot more I/O, and it's a lot more powerful. It's a much more powerful chip. And I wanted to be able to talk Wi-Fi, and this guy doesn't have Wi-Fi. So I picked up some what are called node MCUs. This is an ESP32, and it looks like this. And it's a little MCU, so it's a little controller, and it's got a Wi-Fi radio on it. And this, you can program this up yourself, but it's pretty limited. It's a pretty small chip compared to the other one. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to have these on the same board talking to each other. So you can go with a breadboard, which looks like this, where you plug them in and then you jump everything together with wires to make it. And I've done that. I actually have one. I don't think I have one up here, but I made the machine on a breadboard by attaching these things together. But I wanted a more elegant solution, and I wanted a solution that was more industrial and more rugged and would work out. So what I did was I designed this board. And you can tell it's one of my designs because it's got the little skull guy on here. His eyes light up red. And what this is designed to do is it's designed to take this guy, and it sits right here. Oops, the pins are a bit bent, so it's not going in there very easily. These are actually junked. So this one sits here, and this one sits here, and then I let them talk to each other. And so this guy talks to this guy, and then this guy sends the signal out by Wi-Fi. So that's what that looks like. You need to be able to get signals on and off, right? So this is a standard screw terminal here. And I made room for this here. And so it sits on there nicely, and you put your wires in and you screw them down. The problem is when you've got a bunch of these and you need to take the controller out for some reason and put it back in, you've got a lot of screws to loosen to get all the wires out. And then when you put it back in, you have to figure out which wire goes where and screw them all back in again. So there's a better solution, and that's this guy. So this is your standard screw terminal, and you can see that on the front, they look relatively the same. They've got places where you stick your wires in, and they've got screws. But this guy is pluggable. There we go. So this part stays on the board and this part unplugged. So you can leave all your wires plugged in here and just unplug it. And you can see here that that's exactly what's going on right there. These things plug into the side of the controller. So let's go back here. All right. So the problem with these on this board is that when you plug these in, if you plug them in here, they're too far out. So we plug them in back here like this. But then it's too low. So I had to make these. And what this is it's just a little spacer board. So it goes on the bottom of here, like that. That goes on the bottom of there. So when you put this on here, it actually raises it up that little bit. And you can see it raises it up just a little bit there. But that's enough to clear the bottom of the case. Right? So once that board is assembled, and this guy here goes on here. All right. So that's what the controller board looks like when it's finished. It's got a riser connector here to go up to another board. Then the MEGA2560 is here. This is what runs the program that runs the maple syrup system. And then this guy, the ESP32, it sits here, and all it's used for, this guy uses him as a modem. So I send status information out by serial to this guy. He interprets it, and then it sends it out by MQTT, which is a message protocol. So you send messages, they go to a controller, And it's called a broker. And what it does is you subscribe to the broker to specific messages, and then every time that message is updated, it gets sent out to you. So we've got our little controller here. You can see the wires connecting the MEGA2560 out to the terminals here to take the various signals out. And then on the bottom, you can see actually a trace goes across here, and there's a couple of resistors. This is actually a voltage divider, because this is a 3.3 volt device and this is a 5 volt device. So these resistors here divide the voltage so that this guy talks 5 volts, but this guy only hears 3.5 volts. And then there's another board here that I had made that actually goes in the top of the case. And that's where the riser connector goes to, right there. And it's got an LCD on it, and it's got a buzzer and some little indicators and stuff. And so that board goes in here, in the top of the case. So this is the case that the controller sits in. And it's got a rotary encoder here where you can push to select, and you can twist to scroll up and down in the menu, and a couple of push buttons, 3 indicator LEDs there that light up to show you various conditions, and then the little skull guy there with the light up eyes again. So where is my riser connector? I've lost it. Oh, there it is. So there's this little riser here. It plugs in right there. And then this board here plugs in like this, and you have to line up. I don't know whether you can see that. That guy there needs to line up with that. So you slide this in here like this, line it up inside the case there, and then push it in to engage the pins, and it's not lined up. Come on, you can get in there. There we go. So that fits in there like that. And then the bottom goes on here like this. So that's what the controller for the maple syrup system looks like. And you plug all your wires in, and then the wires plug in here like this on the side, and that's how you make the connections. The code that runs my system on the MEGA2560, which is the big controller, it's written in a compiled basic called Bascom AVR. And the stuff that goes on the ESP32 is written in Sketch, which is the C language that's used by the Arduinos. And all that code does is receive the messages from the MEGA2560 and then send them out over Wi-Fi. But all of the actual control of the maple syrup system is done by the MEGA2560. Okay, so this is what the controller looks like on the wall. This is just in my office, inside my shed. And this is the system that I develop on. So it's identical to the one that's out in the machine room. Everything is exactly the same. It's got the same power supply. The same power supply. It's got a breaker up here that I can use to turn the power supply on and off. And these little adapter boards that I built here, all this does is it brings all 9 of the wires that come out on these screw terminals here, and you can see these are pluggable. So it brings all of those wires out onto this ribbon cable, which then comes down here. And what we've got going on right here, this is actually a simulation of the machine. So this board is designed for testing. So the bottom and top float switches in the releaser are right here. This is the float switch in the transfer tank. This LED indicates that the vacuum pump is on. This is the vacuum solenoid and air solenoid, and this is the transfer pump. And then these are all the float switches in the various storage tanks. This guy here is a laser time of flight rangefinder. And what I do with these, the plan is this year, is it's going to go in the top of the tank, and it's going to let me know exactly how many millimeters of fluid there are in my tank. So I know what the height is in millimeters. By knowing the depth to the surface, I can calculate what percentage of my tote is full. So there's going to be one of these in each of the totes. There's going to be one in the releaser, and there's going to be one in each of the barrels, so that I can tell exactly what the fluid level is in each of them at any given time. And then on the back here are 3 DS18B20 temperature probes. These are digital thermometers. One is inside air, so the air inside the machine room, so that I know what the temperature is in there, so that I know whether my sap is going to spoil. one for the outside temperature, so I know whether it's warm enough to actually start the system, and one for the temperature of the vacuum pump, because if the vacuum pump overheats, that's bad. So I want to know what the temperature of the vacuum pump is. And then these are for the laser rangefinders. Once I get them all hooked up, I can test them there. And then this other little jack here on the back, this little guy right here, this box header, this is a USB ASP programmer. And so I use this to load code. These wires here are patched directly up to the programming port on the MEGA2560. So when I want to load code onto the box up there on the wall, all I do is I plug my notebook in here, load the code on, it loads, it runs, and we're good to go. So here we are on the wall. And if we switch this guy on, you'll see it powers up. And it checks the DS18B20s to make sure they're good. It says they're all good, and now we're running. So the green flashing light there is a heartbeat. It says we are up and running and everything's good. It flashes once a second just to let us know the program is running. And then you see the little skull in there. That's my logo that I put on all my boards. That's my controller. And it is a lot of custom work, a lot of work that I've done. The code that runs on it is pretty basic. Both the code on the MEGA2560 and on the ESP32 are pretty straightforward. If anybody is interested in doing this, this is a standard case. I just bought this at Digikey. It's a bud case. I have the boards. If anybody wants to try this, I can send you a board. You can buy all of the various parts that you need on eBay or at Digikey. If you're made of money, I can give you the part numbers. And I'm happy to share my code. I'm happy to collaborate. It's an important project to me. My wife calls it a very expensive hobby, which I think is fair, but that's my controller. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to comment down below. Send me a message. I'm easy to approach. I'm easy to deal with, and I'm happy to talk about maple syrup and embedded computing and PC board manufacturing and soldering and all of the things that are involved. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and reach out. Thank you very much.